Hey, anything going on? Anything you guys want to talk about? Anything of a legal nature you want to ask me about? I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do pretend to be right about all the answers.
You want to ask it?
And I think that's why so many people like me. I am open to questions. I guess I have to figure out, since I'm doing this on both YouTube and Twitter, I'm going to have to take my questions on YouTube. I think it will work best. Okay, so we'll look for comments. There. The good thing about me is you're not gonna ever find a love like mine. So anyone have anything to say about the exciting developments? Hi, Mr. Ritter. Hi, Sakurakuro. Notifications not working lately. Sakurakuro, I can't help you with that. Come on, I'm just Ron Coleman. Okay. Hi, Badassahog. Thank you for joining me. There I am. Also on Attorney Coleman. Okay, so Nick has a question on Twitter. Attorney Coleman, under what theory could pro-Roe federal legislation be challenged? Does it violate the 10th Amendment? Well, that would be one of the theories. I think it would very likely require a constitutional amendment based on today's ruling and the direction that the court has been going on for a while. The Supreme Court views this as a matter to be decided by the states. What would be the federal right to an abortion? Under what would it be like a civil rights? Would it be like civil rights legislation? That, again, I think that would be hard to square with the 10th Amendment, and certainly with today's ruling. In layman's terms, what is Casey about? I think it's about, like, I don't know, 40 pages or something. I'm sorry. Dolly, you asked me on Twitter, in layman's terms, what is Casey about? And in layman's terms, when you say what is Casey about, what the Supreme Court decided today was that Roe versus Wade was a mistake. It was a mistake that used a lot of loose language and a lot of language that was not so loose that has subsequently been ignored, such as the matters of viability. And it took away from the states, really, by merely an assertion of judicial power, or judicial fiat, if you will, the ability to make policies. At the time, it may have seemed as if this was a natural outgrowth of the right of privacy that the Supreme Court found was a result of the penumbras and emanations of the enumerated rights in the Constitution. And Justice Thomas, in his dissent, makes the argument, not his dissent, I'm sorry, in his concurrence, makes the argument. I'm so used to saying Justice Thomas in his dissent, makes the argument that we should revisit those. The Supreme Court should revisit those decisions as well, because they essentially enshrined a non-textual constitutional right into American constitutional jurisprudence. Fly Fox asks me, do I think that the states that have criminal penalties for abortion will actually enforce them? Some will. If they don't, I don't think there are states that are passing these laws that don't intend to enforce them. Mark says, pretty obvious why Thomas didn't write the majority opinion. Yes, it is, because he wants to do away. I'm going to move my face down a little bit. He wants to do away with Griswold, and obviously Roberts wasn't going to let that happen. If you're in a state where abortion is illegal, is it first-degree murder or a different charge? No, it certainly is not going to be first-degree murder. I don't think there's any state that has ever treated abortion like murder, at least in relatively modern times. And that would be, that would be quite a stretch. I'll take that advice. Thank you. What's the likelihood that SCOTUS's ruling will cause people to move to or away from states which do or do not support abortion? Pretty low. It's pretty low. I think, frankly, a lot of people make noise about that kind of thing. I think it's about the same as the number of people who actually moved to Canada when Donald Trump was elected and whenever a Republican is elected. People talk a good game. If you want an abortion, you can travel to California or New York or any of the many, many red states, or blue states rather, that will continue to offer you every single opportunity you might like to have an abortion. I'm going to refresh on Twitter here and see if there are any other questions that have been asked there. Under what theory could we asked that question already. Do I think this will hurt the red wave that Republicans were pretty much guaranteed in November? And Alan says, the answer is obviously yes. I just want to see if you're wrong or not. No, it won't hurt the red wave at all, because this has all been, the sides have been chosen already. There's no one who is voting Republican in 2024 or in 2022 who is pro-choice or who believes that, I'll stop there, who's pro-choice. I mean, there might be some people, because those people, even pro-choice, might realize, well, several things. One is that Roe versus Wade was never a very well-reasoned opinion. But even if you're so-called pro-choice, you may nonetheless realize that it doesn't make sense for you to, it doesn't make sense for you to throw out all other issues because of the abortion issue. So I don't think there's, so let's put it this way. There are people who are pro-choice who are going to vote Democrat who might otherwise not have voted Democrat in earlier times. But at this point, I think the alignment, the issues have been made. And in fact, if anything, this is going to bring some strong conservatives back to the polls. There's no way that, in my opinion, that it could be otherwise. The darkest days for women today. It's a tragedy, and many women will die in agony because of the Supreme Court ruling. You know what, Jay? That's actually not true. Anyone who dies in agony is bringing it on herself, because all she needs to do is get a bus or train or a ride to a blue state that not only, and some of them like California, are not only continuing to offer abortions, they will pay you to come and have one there. They're very, very, and in terms of dark days for women, I think there are female fetuses who probably will not die as a result of today's ruling. So the definition of a fetus will be left to states to define. I doubt it may happen, but could people vote and say that a fetus includes moments after immediate birth? Well, okay, so states would be free to define the definition of a fetus. Could people vote and say a fetus includes moments after immediate birth? Well, changing the definitions of words and concepts is not a new thing. It's something that the left and the Supreme Court, in fact, itself have been engaged in for a very long time. But that strikes me as crazy talk. So that would be my joke on that. How many people are ignorant of our government works and the responsibilities of each branch? About 9 billion people are ignorant of how our government works and the responsibilities of each branch. I thought the days of backroom abortions was over, but it looks we're going back in time. Many won't have the money to go elsewhere for an abortion. California will pay you, okay? Sakura Kuro. And if California won't pay, I mean, there's no one who isn't You have months. Remember, you can kill your baby minutes before birth in many of these states. So you've got plenty of time to figure out how to make it happen. Does yesterday's decision make Maryland's concealed carry rules immediately change? Well, what it does is I'm not intimately familiar with Maryland's concealed carry rules. There's going to have to be a determination by a court in Maryland as to whether or not those rules comply with yesterday's gun ruling. Can abortion be charged as attempted murder? I would be quite surprised if any state would take it that far, but I imagine it is eminently possible. Discuss fraud, Irish emergency logistics team says on Twitter. Discuss fraud if you don't mind. Fraud, as you know, is the willfully making a statement on the expectation that the reasonable expectation that a person will rely on it to his detriment, and that statement being materially false. But I have a feeling you're talking about voter fraud. Voter fraud is a real thing. Anyone who doesn't think so is incredibly naive. Anyone who is opposed to voter ID is acknowledging and supporting voter fraud. It's simply that straightforward. There's no reason on earth to ever oppose voter fraud because, to oppose voter ID, especially in environments, it's not, we're not in the Jim Crow South. I think Texas's voter ID law says if you need a voter ID, come in, we'll get you one for free if you can't pay for it. There's no reason. The fraud is widespread. I don't know specifically. I know that when people advocate for policies that are anti-transparency, whether it's ID or the ability to observe the counting of ballots, or for that matter, the moving of election day to basically an entire month so that people can vote by mail or have their votes, all the nonsense that's been going on in the last 5 years or so with voting, that's all to encourage fraud. Anyone who doesn't believe that is just simply too naive to have the conversation with me, and we're not going to get along on that topic. Ron, thanks for being a man of good heart and wisdom. Well, I do think my heart is okay. I had an EKG last week, as a matter of fact. And despite the fact that I probably don't deserve it, my heart is just fine. Wisdom, thank God. Listen, I try my very best, okay? Whether you think I'm wise or not. Rohan, 45, it's such a dark day. I think this is a sort of a parody comment. When you can't keep your legs closed, use birth control the day after, pill drive across the state line. We just have, yes, this is her dark day response, and it's a little bit rough-edged, but I definitely get the point. You have the right not to open your legs. There we go again. Why are you and Harmeet so amazing? Oh, that is very kind of you. Harmeet is the one who's amazing. I'm really just a humble laborer in the orchards of the law. What else we got here? Well, how weird. So someone has commented on that. Ben Shapiro, you've heard of him. Weird how fast we switched from men can give birth to. Can I do a share? Yeah, let's just do this. I should first gotta close the messages. I make that mistake sometimes. So let's get Ben's take. Share screen. There it is. You can read it for yourself. Weird how fast we switched from men can give birth to women can't be equal in America without the ability to keep their preborn children. Kill their preborn children. I'm not exactly sure what preborn children are, but whatever it is, I'm sure it makes sense because Ben, besides being a client of our law firm, is a very, very smart guy. And his point is obviously not the preborn children, but rather their men can give birth. Why is this a tragedy for women? I thought men and women were the same sex. To quote the Fireside Theater and our up-and-coming new pre-confirmed Supreme Court justice. Sakura Kuro. I know many married couples who cannot afford a child at the moment. Okay, I know many people who can't afford to pay taxes. Plus, you should have added "keep it in your pants, dude." It forces more than one. Okay, Sakura Kuro, I get your point. I think you've made it. I frankly think it's baloney. Not baloney that you're lying, but I just think that the argument doesn't hold water. What do we got here? Going back to Twitter's. Carla was a single mother, and she did it just fine. I bet you did, Carla. My father, of blessed memory, was also a child who was raised not only by a single mother, but his mother died when he was 9, and he was raised by his immigrant grandmother. And I got to tell you, those of you who have followed me for any amount of time have heard me say this before. In fact, this Sunday or Monday is the anniversary of on the Jewish calendar, the anniversary of my father's passing. My father was raised by a single mother and by a grandmother who came from Czechoslovakia in 1898 and knew little, to put it mildly, of this new world in this crazy country. Raised a fantastic father, a man who was loyal to his wife and loving and generous to his family. And yeah, I'm gonna just throw this one up because it's such a favorite picture of mine. I will share that. And yes, I always think, in fact, specifically about the fact that my dad would certainly have been. Here we go. Silly double screen stuff does make things silly sometimes. So I'm going to share a picture of you with me and my dad when I was just a young child. Okay, there's Dad and me. Look at that loving smile. Okay, it's a smile he never got from his dad, but that he nonetheless was able to give me and my brother. And I can't say that he was necessarily a perfect parent, but he was I think he was a fantastic parent. In many ways, a better father than I was to my children, because he was willing to do. He just was much more patient and not. He just didn't think as much of himself as I do of myself. Ron Coleman live. Someone I'd rather listen to. Ron, I miss you just like with Twitter. Much love. Oh, so that's Becca coming through to me on YouTube. Thank you, Becca. It is very nice to have you here. I'm easy to find, though. I'm on pretty much everything that isn't Twitter these days. Muffin Man. Hey, how fast before another abortion right case worms its way up to the Supreme Court? That will be 14 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. Do you think there will be fiery but mostly peaceful protests in blue cities like LA? I guess so. I mean, it's been staged and pre-planned for a very long time that there would be violent, orgies of violence of some kind, which would not constitute anything like insurrection or, the bad kind of violence. Gurmy Wormy. My father's birth giver was a young 18-year-old college student and was put up for adoption. My grandparents were happy. Oh, in other words, your father was born to an 18-year-old college student who was his mother. My grandparents were happy to take him in because they were having issue conceiving their own. Well, yeah, adoption is an issue. It's interesting why people are. I don't know what to tell you. Why don't more people who have abortions give their children up for adoption? It's ironic that, my natural inclination, just as a person who is familiar with the human condition, is to think that they actually find that prospect more emotionally difficult to deal with, the idea of having a child and having it raised by someone else, than terminating the pregnancy. Ron, are you optimistic, asks Matt, on more Second Amendment cases coming up from the Supreme Court? Do you think we will wait another decade? I don't know how. That's it's a my guess is as good as yours. The fact that this one finally broke through and that it was such a profound ruling, I think a lot depends on Roberts. He's still basically a swing vote. He is incrementalist, whether he wants his court to be known as one that makes, more than a series of conservative, friendly rulings, as it has in the last couple of weeks. I think he will be a large decision maker there. I do see your point that it seems likely that there will be more issues that will have to be elucidated, and that the Supreme Court has largely avoided addressing for a very long time. Or not. In the past, people wanted abortions rather adoption because of the shame of bastardry. Now people aren't ashamed of that at all. That's a very good point. Both because of the shame of bastardry for the child, and for the shame of being an unwed mother, or the mother of a mother bearing a child and someone who's not her husband. And you're right. Today, there's no reason on earth there is no moral opprobrium attached to any of that. The husband and two sisters are adopted. His older sister is product of what the left argues. We wouldn't have any of them if abortion was okay to their biological mothers. I mean, that's true. And it's, like I said, it's true about my dad. I do think there is, a sort of generic canned answer to that, which is that you can't really deduce what the right thing to do is just because other people didn't have choices in the past. That doesn't mean that people today shouldn't have choices. But it does make you realize that many great people who exist in the world today, not just your friend Ron Coleman and his family and all his descendants, would not exist. I mean, I don't know for a fact that my grandmother would have had an abortion, but I know that in today's environment, it would have been unremarkable if she had. And Wick, did I see Pelosi's response that SCOTUS just removed the Constitution right? Nancy Pelosi is a profoundly unserious person, but she is saying something that basically all the people who see this issue that way are going to say. So it's not surprising the fact that Nancy Pelosi, please. Will this affect IVF? Artificial insemination. This process allows for extra leftover fertilized embryos to be disposed or donated for experimentation. It's disposed or donated for experimentation. Let's call it research. Could this be labeled abortion? I think that there are going to be states that are going to label that abortion. I do think that's a very, very likely. With this, do you think there'll be a more serious move to pack the court? Yes. Let's see what else we got here. Nancy Pelosi is a cynical crook, but she's serious about her craft. She is. I have found many times that one of the things that bothers me the most about what's happening politically in our country, not just politically, but culturally, is that people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, people have heard me say this a million times on a million podcasts. I understand that there are young radical people and there are old radical people. But when you're such a system rat like someone like Schumer and Pelosi, and you nonetheless allow your party to be taken over by truly subversive elements because you want to stay in power, that to me is even more disgusting than what they also do, which is make a grand fortune while in office. Oh, so Carla is right on point with me. She can't believe how much greed there is out there in Congress, right? I mean, you think that once you have feathered your nest, it's bad enough that they permit so much nest feathering, and that virtually nothing they do is ever called out. But you would think that after feathering your nest to some great extent, you know, 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, that would be enough for you. But some people have made incredible fortunes while in Congress, abusing the system, abusing their positions of power, the knowledge that they are privy to. It's an awful thing. Anything else? Any more questions via Twitter? I'm wondering if this will affect access to the morning after pill. Lisa, don't wonder. It will affect access to the morning after pill in some states. I don't have any doubt whatsoever. On the other hand, I very much doubt that it will be hard to get a morning after pill, even in such states, because there is no place in America where you can't get a controlled substance or an illegal drug. That will continue to be the case if you're getting something which is more or less, an over-the-counter or a prescribed medication, or whatever the case may be, available throughout the United States. I'm sure you'll be able to get it, and states aren't going to be able to do anything about it, even if they want to. If Roe versus Wade, asks Marissa, were not constitutionally sound, then what constitutional right protects men and women having government determine their reproductive medical decisions? Apparently none. If you believe that is a right, then you need to have the Constitution of the state where you live or the United States Constitution amended so that right will be protected. This is just what laws do. Laws tell us all kinds of things that we can and cannot do. There's nothing particularly sacrosanct from a civil liberties point of view that makes, in my opinion, which is the correct opinion, which makes reproductive decisions any different from a host of medical decisions. What, by the way, was the constitutional right that protected men and women from not being able to get hydrochloroquine and not to be able to hear about alternative treatments for COVID? Evidently, there wasn't one, right? The law was, and it wasn't necessarily a law that was passed by a legislature, but the emergency powers that were granted to the governors and to the United States, which the United States government took upon itself, essentially made it impossible to get certain kinds of treatment for COVID. That's a medical decision. Vaccination, mandatory vaccination. There are all kinds of rights, all kinds of things government tells us that we can and cannot do. There's nothing about reproductive rights that makes them any more of a right unless and until they are either granted as a right, in other words, ensconced in a constitution, or in theory, it could be legislatively as a right, or unless someone can identify a natural right basis for such a policy. Margie says there should be no right to kill a baby. Well, I would agree with that. How accurate, asks Nico, how accurate was the leaked decision? Any serious punishment coming for the leaker? I am not aware of anyone who has done a line-by-line analysis yet. I'm hoping that someone will do so. It'll be very interesting to see. Any serious punishment coming for the leaker? Not if they don't find out who it is. States' rights, the way it should be. Well, it probably should be, to a very large extent. Yes. Carla, again, she has lupus. Governor Sisolak banned it for people like me. Banned hydrochloroquine to hoard it for the prison system. Yeah, well, that is believable to me. They really do not care. Will this make thalidomide illegal too? I don't think thalidomide is legal anymore, right? Didn't they stop using it after they saw what it was doing to babies? Maybe they stopped using it just for pregnant women. I'm not sure. No, I don't think it will. Will the gun decision provide a lever against red flag laws? I think it will be quoted and cited in challenges to red flag laws. I do think so. I have the same thought, and it seems inevitable to me that it will be. Mark O. Wagoner. I just want you guys to know, there's a great guy who has followed me for many, many years. Mark O. Wagoner. Who linked the opinion? Asked Mark. And Mark knows, of course, that I don't know. And if I did know, would I just tell you? I don't think so. Missy answers that question. Yeah, I don't think so. Why was Roe versus Wade bad law? I don't think anyone. Well, why was it bad law? And why was it badly? I mean, read the opinion. I mean, I think it explains it very well. It was not based on any. It was built on the structure of Griswold, which itself is a questionable decision. Again, we might all think and agree, everyone here, that especially if you're not a Catholic, that contraception is both morally acceptable and in all circumstances, and that the state should have nothing to say about that. That doesn't mean that the law has to enforce our point of view over other legal policies that affect people's behavior and which are based on moral and natural law principles than any other policy. That's how law works. Don't kid yourself. That's how it's always worked. Abortion isn't in the Constitution, was a reason, but you forget woman isn't either. I don't really know what that means. Thalidomide, says Russell, explaining, it is given in combination with prednisolone, which I remember is a steroid, and melphalan to treat myeloma in patients age 65 or older, in other words, people who cannot get pregnant, who are not suitable for stem cell treatment. Any law created by a judge is bad law. So let's keep in mind here, we operate in a common law system. This is not a civil law system, which would be based on the Roman law approach, which was subsequently adapted by the Napoleonic Code, which is popular in many parts of continental Europe largely because of the influence of Napoleon. And as you know, still exists to a large extent in the state of Louisiana, where almost every possible legal question is attempted to be answered by a legislatively enacted answer. I'm not an expert on civil law. The idea of the common law is we look to traditional approaches and analogous situations to deduce what the law should be. And there are many, many forms of law that, although they have ultimately become statutory, still rely to a large extent on concepts that arise from what are called the courts of equity. These are judge-made laws, and they're very common sense, and very few people who are listening to this would disagree with them. Things such as contribution or contributory negligence. If I sue you for negligence, but I have caused the injury myself to some or all of the extent of the injury suffered, that's a judge-made law. So, in fact, is the concept of negligence. Negligence is judge-made law. So we actually do have lots and lots of judge-made law. So the question is, well, how about judge-made constitutional law? Should judges be allowed to create rights? And, to some extent, when Griswold said that penumbras and emanations define a right of privacy for, a constitutional right of privacy, it wasn't so crazy. It just happened to be a stretch, because there are lots and lots of penumbra's and emanations that seem to cut in the opposite direction. And in fact, the Fourth Amendment, which guards against unlawful searches and seizures, would seem to be the source for the zone of what is and is not protected as a matter of privacy. But every interpretation of a right, whether it's a statutory right or a constitutional right, is ultimately going to be what we call judge-made law. So we need to be careful with, especially again in a common law system, with being too skeptical about judge-made law. It's basically the way we work. Mexico is also under the Roman law model, not surprising, correct? Was this one of the biggest reversals of the SCOTUS, and what are other great reversals of SCOTUS in the past? Well, I think that's a very good question. This is definitely one of the biggest reversals for them to actually turn around and, while it's still a live issue, say we decided wrongly, and of course, there's not the same court members, but there is this conception that it's the same court. What are other great reversals of SCOTUS in the past? I don't know if there's one that is on this level. There have been reversals. I have a kind of a mental block with case names. So rather than embarrass myself, I'm going to let someone who is a bona fide constitutional scholar answer that question. Frederick Douglass Bridge has a jumper. Those are the code words. We will be releasing the missiles momentarily. Well, again, someone is jumping off, someone is threatening to jump off the Frederick Douglass Bridge. I don't know where the Frederick Douglass Bridge is. I'm sorry that someone's going to jump. Dred Scott, it does come to mind. The thing about Dred Scott was it was reversed after, I think, I'm not positive of this, but I think that it was reversed after it really had no effect. Because of constitutional amendments that were passed after the Civil War, I think. Please, guys, again, never let anyone tell you that I am a constitutional law expert, because I am not. Here is another question from Twitter that I would like to share. It's from Diablito de Oro, the Golden Devil, calling herself National Schism Enjoyer. I'm saying herself because of the avatar, but I don't really know. Will the protests become violent? And will violent protests hurt the Dems more than the Dobbs decisions embolden Dem voters in the 2022 midterms? Answer is yes to both questions. Excellent question from Colonel of Wisdom, otherwise known as Southern Actual, who asks, is this Putin's pregnancy push? I like what you did there. Well done. Well done. I'm going to be on for like another 5 minutes. 45 minutes, I think, is enough for this. I'm hoping that I will hear back soon from people that I'm working with on signing off on this brief so I can get it signed, but right now that email has not come in. Yes. It was 4 on reversing row and 6-3. Someone makes this point, which I'm not so sure is a great point, but I haven't really had a chance to look. Free at Last argues, all right, so this was my tweet, 6-3. Brian Ross says, I wonder if the league bumped it from 5-4 to 6-3, and then Free at Last asks whether it was, or suggests it was 5-4 on reversing row and 6-3 on ruling the Mississippi law constitutional. Not quite sure I understand how that would work. I don't see how the Mississippi law could be constitutional without overturning Roe versus Wade. C. Mulvena, I'm Irish. Abortion has only recently become legal in Ireland, so I'm as confused as heck by this. Can you elaborate? Is it still legal? Yes, except where it's illegal. And every state now has the ability to make abortion illegal and to define or to define when abortion shall be legal. They can choose viability. They can choose, uh, an arbitrary month. There's no federal principle. There's no federal constitutional right that will affect a state's ability to legislate on that topic. That doesn't mean that. Keep in mind, folks, many states, especially blue states, have abortion as a constitutional right of their states. Roland asks, when I say that judicial influence is so important because of the clowns of Congress and the slowness of the Congress in creating laws, I think that you're onto something. I don't know if I would even call it slowness. I would say Congress is an utterly dysfunctional branch of government, and that definitely gives Congress. There are two things. One is that Congress is dysfunctional. It doesn't pass laws. Everything has become hyper partisan. Even the most neutral, politically and ideologically neutral laws certainly during the Trump years were voted against by Democrats because of some asinine approach to life that they've all chosen. But the other thing I think that's really important is that there have been a lot of judicial opinions, especially regarding how to interpret statutes, that Congress has always been free to remedy, or that state legislatures have been free to remedy, merely by passing a law, making clear what their original intent was, or just reversing what the judicial interpretation of that statute was. And it's amazing how infrequently that happens. And that includes situations where the party who seems to be most likely to have an interest in taking such action, remedial action, overturning, so to speak, a judicial overturning of a statute, has either a veto-proof majority or both houses or whatever the case may be, whether it's state or federal. They don't do it nearly as often as they could do it, and that I think is because of a lack of fortitude. Some states may move to post-birth abortion since it's more logically consistent. I don't really know what that means. Actually, Roland, those are the sounds of Newark. New York is across the river from where I am. I'm in Newark now. Congress will continue to try a national statute on abortion. In this context, people have to negotiate to get it passed. It will not pass. Thank you, Miss Mulvena. I assume it's Miss. Akiva says Roe versus Wade was dead the moment Democrats started saying abortion was something everyone should get. I guess. Mark is, in fact, backing me up on this. The 14th Amendment overruled Dred Scott. Brown versus Board of Education may be the biggest reversal. I don't think it's as big as this one. It's true. So Brown versus Board of Education, which held that separate but equal was in fact not equal, and which really informs all of our civil rights jurisprudence. I don't know I don't know how we measure it. I'm sure that's the topic of that people who are really knowledgeable about constitutional law and this sort of thing will be happy to engage with. Let's see what else we've got here. Dr. Mulvena, thank you. Since there isn't really a good argument that a fetus isn't biologically human, the real argument is over personhood, not fetal development. I think the argument is over brutality. There's something really brutal about abortion, especially in post-viability. There's something really corrosive to a society that allows what is essentially butchery to take place with no restriction whatsoever. And you can ask theological or philosophical questions about how many angels dance on the head of a pin and viability and personhood. These are all concepts that will contain whatever content we place in them. But there is something very terrible and very uncaring and very contrary to our spiritual health to what abortion, to the what's the word? The sort of sanctity that abortion has achieved in the church of what is still for some reason called liberalism. Folks, I did say I would go 45 minutes. It's been very nice to have so many of you joining me on this stream on so little notice. I haven't got my sign off yet, but I am nonetheless going to stand ready to do it. Thanks again for joining me. Everyone have a great Shabbos. I'll be around for a while, not on video, but remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, it would really be nice if you would like and subscribe to my Ron Coleman Lawyer channel. You know, I don't do a lot of streaming, but you like to have a nice following. And if you're on Twitter, I thank you as well. Twitter, as you know, is my real home, and I hope that the people don't take it away from me. Have a good Shabbos.